3 months ago, I was just Marcus Williams, a recently divorced tech consultant trying to rebuild my life in my grandfather's old fishing cabin. Today, I'm the guy who owns the lake that an entire HOA has been illegally profiting from for years. And boy, did they pick the wrong person to mess with. You see, the Pinewood Lakes Homeowners Association thought they could bully me into submission with their fancy legal threats and manufactured violations. What they didn't know was that my family had been quietly sitting on the most valuable piece of real estate in the county, and I was about to find out just how valuable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this wild ride started. Last spring, after my divorce finalized and my corporate consulting firm imploded during the market downturn, I found myself inheriting my grandfather Samuel's lakefront property. The old man had passed at 89, leaving me his modest fishing shack, as he always called it, along with 47 acres of what the tax records claimed was mostly worthless marshland. The cabin itself was a solid 1960s build, nothing fancy but honest cedar construction that had weathered 5 decades of Minnesota winters without complaint. Grandpa Sam had always been humble about the place, calling it his little slice of nowhere special whenever family visited. But standing on that weathered dock, watching the morning mist rise off perfectly clear water while loons called across the stillness, I knew I'd found something rare. The lake stretched about half a mile in each direction, surrounded by dense pine forest that had somehow escaped development. Until recently. 3 years ago, Pinewood Development Corporation had finished their crown jewel, Pinewood Lakes Estates. 43 luxury homes ranging from $800K to $1.2 million, all marketed as exclusive lakefront, living with private community amenities. Most of the new neighbors seemed decent enough. Retirees from the Twin Cities looking for peace, young professionals working remotely, families wanting their kids to grow up around nature instead of strip malls. The kind of people who wave when they see you at the mailbox and actually mean it. But every paradise has its serpent, and ours came wearing a HOA badge. The Pinewood Lakes Homeowners Association had formed automatically when the development sold its final lots. Standard procedure for planned communities: create a legal entity to maintain shared amenities, enforce architectural standards, and preserve property values. On paper, it made perfect sense. In practice, it became a weapon for petty tyrants to terrorize their neighbors. The harassment started subtle: a politely worded letter suggesting that my rustic cabin aesthetic might benefit from contemporary updates to match community standards. Then came the helpful reminder that all waterfront properties were subject to HOA architectural review, regardless of when they were built. I ignored the letters. My grandfather's cabin predated their plastic kingdom by 40 years. Surely they understood basic property law. Apparently not. The escalation happened faster than lake ice, melting in spring. What started as friendly suggestions became formal violation notices. What began as community standards became financial warfare designed to force me out. June brought my first official HOA fine, $200 for non-approved exterior paint colors. My cabin's natural cedar siding, which had never been painted in 5 decades, was apparently an affront to community aesthetics. July delivered a $500 penalty for unauthorized dock modifications. The dock my grandfather had built in 1963, which had been grandfathered under every county ordinance for 60 years, was suddenly a violation of HOA maritime standards. August brought the nuclear option: a $1,000 monthly fine for chronic noncompliance with community architectural guidelines, plus a demand for $200 in back penalties, legal fees, and administrative costs. The woman running this extortion racket was Janet Crawford, a former real estate agent who'd appointed herself HOA president for life. She had the aggressive efficiency of someone who'd spent decades strong-arming people into bad decisions, combined with the self-righteousness of someone who genuinely believed she was saving civilization one violation notice at a time. Janet had moved to Pinewood Lakes from some cookie-cutter suburb in Edina, bringing with her an unwavering faith that property values were the highest moral good and that anyone who disagreed was personally responsible for destroying America's neighborhoods. Her opening move was psychological warfare. She convinced the HOA board to hire a property management company that specialized in aggressive compliance enforcement. Suddenly, I was receiving certified letters daily, each one more threatening than the last. Her second wave was social isolation. Janet worked the neighborhood like a political operative, hosting coffee meetings and cocktail parties where she'd paint me as the selfish outsider, threatening everyone's investment. She was particularly effective with the newer residents who'd stretched their budgets for lakefront living and were terrified that any decrease in property values might cost them their retirement dreams. But her masterstroke was legal intimidation. Janet hired Bentley & Associates, a law firm that specialized in HOA enforcement, to file a lien against my property for unpaid fines and fees. The lean paperwork looked official enough to fool anyone who didn't read the fine print, which revealed it was based entirely on the HOA's self-declared authority over my pre-existing property. By September, Janet had successfully painted me as the neighborhood pariah. Half the residents avoided eye contact when I checked my mail. The other half shot me dirty looks while muttering about property values and community standards. That's when she made her fatal mistake. The Tuesday morning that changed everything started ordinary enough. I was drinking coffee on my dock, watching a great blue heron stalk fish in the shallows, when Janet's BMW crunched up my gravel driveway like an approaching tank. She emerged wearing her full uniform, designer business suit, perfectly styled helmet hair, and the expression of someone about to deliver divine justice. In her manicured hands, she clutched what looked like legal documents. "Mr. Williams," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no in her entire HOA career. "I'm here to deliver final notice. You have 72 hours to bring your property into full compliance with community standards or face immediate legal action for removal." She handed me a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Inside were photographs of my cabin from every conceivable angle, each one captioned with alleged violations: unpermitted structure modifications, non-conforming paint scheme, unauthorized waterfront development, violation of community architectural covenant. "This is ridiculous," I said, flipping through page after page of manufactured complaints. "My family has owned this property since 1962. Your HOA was incorporated 3 years ago. You have no authority here." Janet's smile could have frozen the lake in July. "Mr. Williams, when you chose to remain in this community after the HOA formation, you automatically agreed to abide by our covenants and restrictions. Ignorance of community law is not a defense." "Community law?" I couldn't help laughing. "Lady, this isn't a community. It's my grandfather's property that you built around." "Was your grandfather's property," Janet corrected, her voice dripping with the satisfaction of someone about to play a winning card. "But property ownership comes with responsibilities to the community, and this community has voted to maintain standards that your property currently violates." She pulled out her phone and began photographing my cabin like she was documenting a crime scene. 72 hours, Mr. Williams. Bring this structure into compliance or face legal consequences that will make those monthly fines look like pocket change." As her BMW disappeared down my driveway, trailing dust and entitlement, I realized Janet Crawford had just made a very expensive mistake. She'd threatened to take away the one thing I actually cared about, my family's legacy, while assuming I was just another pushover who'd fold under pressure. Time to find out exactly what my grandfather had left me. That evening, I descended into my grandfather's basement like an archaeologist entering a tomb. Sam had been a meticulous record keeper, organizing 60 years of property documents with the precision of someone who understood that paperwork could be more valuable than gold. What I found in those cedar-scented boxes changed everything. The original property deed told a story that the modern tax records had forgotten. When my great-grandfather homesteaded this land in 1923, he'd claimed 247 acres under the Enlarged Homestead Act. The property included not just the cabin site, but the entire lake, plus surrounding forest that stretched much farther than anyone realized. When Sam subdivided the property in 1962, selling off parcels to fund his retirement, he'd kept the most valuable pieces for the family. According to the legal descriptions I found, my inheritance included 47 acres of prime lakefront, plus exclusive ownership of the entire 52-acre lake. My hands shook as I read the water rights documentation. The lake had never been transferred to state or county control. It remained private property owned by whoever held the deed to the original homestead parcel. Me. But the basement held even more explosive secrets. A 1961 boundary survey signed by the county and preserved in a fireproof filing cabinet showed property lines that extended far beyond what modern maps indicated. The eastern boundary of my land cut straight through what Pinewood Estates marketed as their community recreation area. The private beach where HOA members held their summer barbecues. My land. The boat launch where they kept their pontoons and fishing boats. My land. The parking area where visitors left their cars during community events. My land. For 3 years, 43 families had been treating my property as their personal playground while simultaneously trying to force me off it. The next morning found me in the basement of the county courthouse, surrounded by the musty smell of decades-old files and the fluorescent hum of bureaucratic purgatory. I was hunting for legal ammunition, and I found enough to start World War III. Evelyn Porter, the chief filing clerk who'd been organizing property records since the Carter administration, became my guide through layers of forgotten legal history. "Most folks never look past their current tax statements," Evelyn said, pulling thick folders with the efficiency of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times. "But old homestead properties are like vintage wine. They get more interesting with age." What we discovered made my heart race like I'd struck oil. My property carried something called riparian rights, dating back to the original 1923 homestead patent. These weren't just abstract legal concepts. They meant my family held exclusive privileges over water access and usage that couldn't be overridden by local ordinances or HOA regulations. Even better, every structure on my land predated current zoning by decades, protecting them under grandfather clause provisions that made them legally untouchable. But here's where Evelyn dropped the bombshell that would change everything. "Honey," she said, squinting at faded ink through reading glasses that had seen 40 years of property disputes, "according to this 1961 boundary survey, your property extends much farther east than modern tax maps show. See this notation? It includes an additional 12 acres that would encompass most of what that development calls their recreation area." The implications hit me like lightning. The HOA hadn't just been harassing me about my cabin's appearance. They'd been operating an illegal commercial enterprise on my land, charging fees for access to property they didn't own, while simultaneously trying to evict the actual owner for being an eyesore. Armed with my grandfather's documents, I drove straight to my cousin Daniel's law office. Danny had handled the estate paperwork when Sam passed, but neither of us had realized the full scope of what I'd inherited. "Marcus," Danny said, spreading my documents across his desk like a general planning the perfect battle. "Your grandfather was even smarter than we thought. This HOA problem just became their problem." He traced the property lines with his finger, 40 years of legal experience reading boundaries like sheet music. If these surveys are accurate, the Pinewood Lakes HOA has been operating a for-profit recreation business on your private property for 3 years. That's not just trespassing, that's commercial theft. Danny explained the mathematics of my situation. The HOA collected $200 monthly fees from 43 households specifically for lake access and recreation privileges. That was $8,600 per month or $103,200 annually in fees for using property that belonged to me. Over 3 years, they'd collected over $300,000 in revenue from my lake. But here's the really beautiful part, Danny continued, his strategic mind shifting into full warfare mode. Every property in Pinewood Estates has been receiving substantial tax breaks for being classified as lakefront community residences with shared water access. The county has been giving them collective tax reductions based on their assumed right to use your lake. The revelation struck like a thunderbolt. Not only had the HOA been stealing revenue from my property, but every homeowner had been receiving fraudulent tax benefits based on water access they had no legal right to claim. "This isn't just a property dispute," Danny announced, his voice rising with the excitement of someone who'd found the legal equivalent of buried treasure. "This is a case study in how an entire community can unknowingly participate in systematic property theft and tax fraud." While Janet Crawford spent the week preparing for what she assumed would be my legal execution, I was quietly building a case that would detonate her entire kingdom. Danny arranged for a certified land surveyor to verify the 1961 boundary markers. Within 2 days, GPS equipment had confirmed what my grandfather's faded documents claimed. My property line cut straight through the heart of Pinewood Estates' community amenities. The private beach, the boat docks, the recreation building, the main parking area, all of it sat on land that belonged to me. But we needed more than just property boundaries to win this war. Danny introduced me to Sarah Martinez, an environmental lawyer who specialized in water rights cases. "Private lake ownership in residential developments is rarer than hen's teeth," Sarah explained, reviewing documents that would make law professors weep with joy. "When someone owns an entire lake in a planned community, it creates leverage that can reshape everything." Sarah's research revealed the full scope of what I'd inherited. Not only did I own the lake and surrounding wetlands, but state environmental regulations gave me extraordinary authority over how the water could be used. Every boat in my lake needed my permission to be there. Every swimming party required my approval. Every fishing trip was technically trespassing without my consent. The HOA had been operating like they owned a public resource when they were actually running an illegal commercial enterprise on my private property. Friday afternoon, Janet called an emergency HOA meeting to vote on immediate legal action to protect community standards and property values. She'd rallied the troops for what she clearly expected to be my public execution. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday evening at the community center, a building that, according to my surveys, sat entirely on my land. "This is perfect," Danny said when I told him about Janet's plans. "She's literally inviting you to confront her on your own property while she attempts to have you legally removed from it." Saturday night, we finalized our battle strategy. I would let Janet present her case first, giving her enough rope to hang herself with her own manufactured authority. Then we'd systematically demolish every claim she'd made while revealing the true ownership of everything her community valued. Sunday evening arrived with the electric tension of an execution. 41 residents packed into the community center, the air thick with nervous anticipation and burnt coffee from a pot that had been brewing since morning. Janet commanded the front of the room like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments in the trial of the century. She'd prepared a multimedia presentation complete with photographs, financial projections, and legal documentation that painted me as everything short of a terrorist threat to suburban harmony. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the righteous fury of someone about to deliver divine justice, "tonight we take our community back from an individual who has shown complete contempt for everything we've built together." Her slideshow unfolded like a masterpiece of character assassination. Photo after photo of my cabin from deliberately unflattering angles, expert testimony about how non-conforming structures threaten property values, even financial analysis showing how my resistance to community standards could cost everyone thousands in decreased home equity. This individual has repeatedly ignored legal notices, violated community guidelines, and shown complete disregard for his neighbor's financial well-being, Janet declared, clicking through slides that made my cabin look like a public health hazard. "We are dealing with someone who believes that property ownership gives him the right to damage everyone else's investment." The room murmured with approval for her thorough documentation. Several residents nodded as she detailed my supposed crimes against suburban civilization. "Therefore," Janet announced with the dramatic flourish of someone delivering a death sentence, "I move that this board authorize immediate legal action, including daily fines of $500 until full compliance is achieved, plus recovery of all legal costs incurred by this individual's stubborn refusal to cooperate." The motion was seconded immediately, hands raised around the room in support of ending my reign of terror once and for all. That's when I stood up. "Thank you, Mrs. Crawford, for that thorough presentation," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room with the calm confidence of someone about to detonate a nuclear weapon. "I have some information that might interest everyone before we vote on anything." Danny stepped forward carrying our briefcase of legal ammunition while our surveyor wheeled in GPS equipment that looked like it belonged at NASA Mission Control. "Before we discuss my alleged violations," I continued, "I think everyone should know exactly whose property we're talking about." The surveyor's equipment hummed to life, projecting precise GPS coordinates onto the community center wall. The display showed an aerial view of Pinewood Lakes with property lines marked in colors that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. "According to official county surveys verified this week," I announced as the display revealed boundaries that extended far beyond what anyone had assumed. "My family's property includes this community center, the main recreation area, the boat launch, and approximately 60% of what you've been calling the community beach." Gasps echoed around the room as residents processed what they were seeing. The amenities they'd been paying HOA fees to access for 3 years were mostly my private property. "That's impossible," Janet shouted, her composed facade cracking like thin ice. "Those are community facilities. We've been maintaining them for years." "Actually," Danny said, stepping forward with the gentle authority of someone who'd been winning property disputes since before most of these people were born, "maintaining someone else's property without permission doesn't establish ownership. It establishes trespassing with improvements." But I wasn't finished dropping bombshells that would reshape everyone's understanding of reality. "There's something else you should know," I continued, watching Janet's face cycle through confusion, anger, and dawning horror. "The lake that gives this community its name, its property values, and its entire identity, according to state water management records, that's privately owned too." The room fell completely silent except for the hum of our equipment and the sound of 41 property owners realizing their paradise might not be what they thought it was. "Every boat in that water, every swimming party, every fishing trip. You've been using my family's private lake for 3 years, while your HOA collected fees for access to water that belongs to me." The chaos that followed my revelation could have powered a small city. 41 property owners suddenly realized their entire lifestyle depended on the generosity of the man their HOA president had spent months trying to destroy. Janet sat in stunned silence, her carefully constructed authority crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. The lawyer she'd hired was quietly packing his briefcase, probably calculating how to avoid malpractice charges for representing a client who'd been unknowingly operating an illegal commercial enterprise. "I know this is shocking news," I said, addressing the room with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards but didn't want to destroy lives. "But I'm not interested in revenge or destruction. I'm interested in creating something better for everyone." Danny distributed copies of our proposed community agreement, terms so reasonable that refusing them would make anyone look insane. Lake access fees, $100 annually per household, compared to the $200 monthly the HOA had been charging. Boat slip rentals, $75 monthly, compared to premium marina rates of $200 plus. Community facility usage, $25 monthly per household for full access. These rates are significantly below market value for private lake communities, Danny explained as residents read terms that would actually save them money while giving them legal access to everything they'd been using illegally. Additionally, Mr. Williams proposes establishing a community improvement fund using surplus revenues to benefit everyone. The mathematics were compelling. Instead of paying $2,400 annually for bogus HOA fees, residents would pay $1,200 for legitimate lake access. They'd save money while gaining legal certainty about their recreational privileges. But the real sweetener was environmental stewardship. I proposed using improvement fund revenues for lake conservation, fish stocking, water quality monitoring, and habitat preservation that would benefit everyone while protecting property values. The vote was 40 in favor, with only Janet abstaining, probably because she was calculating how quickly she could flee the state before anyone pressed charges for financial mismanagement. Within a month, our new Pinewood Lakes Community Association had replaced the corrupt HOA with something resembling actual democracy. Janet quietly moved away after state investigators began examining 3 years of HOA financial records that revealed systematic mismanagement and possible embezzlement. The transformation was remarkable. I used community fund revenues to install proper lighting and maintenance for the recreation areas, creating amenities the HOA had promised but never delivered. We established environmental education programs that turned our lake into a model of conservation stewardship. The financial benefits extended beyond my property. When the county reassessed property values based on legitimate lake access agreements, most families saw their tax burdens decrease while their actual property values increased due to legal certainty about community amenities. But the real victory was healing and community building. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up during Janet's reign of terror began volunteering for improvement projects. We organized annual lake cleanup events, fishing derbies for local kids, and environmental education programs that brought the community together around shared conservation goals. My cabin renovation used sustainable materials and community-friendly design that honored my grandfather's legacy while contributing to neighborhood beauty. Several neighbors volunteered their professional skills: electricians, landscapers, carpenters, turning individual expertise into collective benefit. The most meaningful outcome was establishing the Samuel Williams Environmental Fund using surplus community revenues. The program provides college scholarships for local students studying conservation, environmental science, or sustainable development. We've already funded 3 scholarships, carrying forward my grandfather's wisdom about being good stewards of the land we temporarily inhabit. Our annual Lake Days Festival has become a regional attraction, bringing together multiple communities for celebration of environmental stewardship and community cooperation. Local newspapers featured our story as a model for resolving property disputes through research, documentation, and good faith negotiation instead of expensive legal warfare. Property values throughout Pinewood Lakes have stabilized at their highest levels ever, proving that cooperation builds wealth better than conflict. Several similar communities have adopted our governance model after their own battles with overreaching HOA officials. As I sit on my dock watching sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson, surrounded by the sounds of children playing at our community beach and neighbors sharing evening conversations, I understand what my grandfather really left me. Not just property, but the opportunity to build something better than what came before. The lessons from this experience extend far beyond property law. Research your rights before surrendering to bullies. Most people don't understand what they actually own or what protection they have under law. Document everything. In legal disputes, evidence beats emotion every single time. Old properties often have rights that modern maps don't show. Always get professional surveys, not assumptions. When facing harassment, professional documentation beats emotional reactions. Let bullies hang themselves with their own overreach. Water rights can be privately owned even when everyone assumes they're public. Research before you pay fees to access water that might belong to someone else. Most importantly, real power comes from building solutions that benefit everyone, not from destroying your enemies. Janet Crawford could have avoided this entire disaster by approaching me as a neighbor instead of a target. A simple conversation about community cooperation would have revealed that I wanted the same things everyone else wanted: a beautiful, well-maintained neighborhood where families could build good lives. Instead, she chose warfare and discovered that some battles can't be won through intimidation and manufactured authority. Now, 3 months later, Pinewood Lakes has become what she always claimed to want: a premier lakefront community with pristine amenities and rising property values. The only difference is that we achieved it through cooperation instead of coercion, and environmental stewardship instead of aggressive enforcement. My grandfather Sam would be proud. He always said the best way to win a fight is to make sure everyone benefits from your victory. What's your HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might become the next episode in our ongoing battle against bureaucratic bullies who think fake authority trumps real property rights. If you enjoyed seeing an everyday person outsmart a corrupt system through research and community building, hit that subscribe button. We're building a movement of people who refuse to be pushed around by petty tyrants with clipboards. From all of us at Property Rights Stories, thanks for watching today's David vs. Goliath tale. Remember, knowledge is power, documentation is evidence, and sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what your enemies try to destroy.